Rick Neuheisel, CBS Sports college football analyst and, of course, college football coach as well. He joins us on the program. All right, Rick, we've been talking about this. We've been talking about Clemson. We've been talking about Florida State. We've been talking about Florida. Which one is an easier fix out of those three?
Clemson. Clemson had a defense that looked the part for much of the first half. They've got to find a way to get those wide receivers involved in the offense. Klubnik cannot average less than 5 yards an attempt. That's just not a sustainable way to do it, but they have the wherewithal to get this done. Florida State has no running game and no ability to stop the run, and Florida just flat looked anemic. Now, that may be just because Cam Ward's that good. He looked that good, but you've got a fan base that's already looking in the yellow pages.
Let me go back to Clemson because 4 years ago, they're up there with Alabama. They're there with
That's
Georgia. Right. You know, they're among the elite. And then Dabo said, I'm not doing transfer portal, not doing NIL. I mean, it's irresponsible. Like at some point, he has to do this, right? He has to modernize.
It is a kind of get off my lawn type of statement. It's an old school, I'm not changing for the sake of changing. I get where he's coming from. I think we all wish that we could keep our guys for the length of their time in college, but it is irresponsible to not look out there and see what other teams are doing, especially when you watch Georgia's 2 touchdown catches be by kids that transferred in, one from Vanderbilt and one from Miami.
But if I'm going to look at this, let's say an NFL coach and GM said, we're not going to have free agents. We're just going to take the players we drafted. Well, that's the analogy I would use with Clemson. Hey, we recruited. We don't want anybody else's players. These are the players that we want.
That makes you the best in the business, Dan. You see it. You see the forest through the trees. That is exactly right. And while you have this idea in your head, we're doing more than just playing football games, and we want kids to get their degrees and graduate and feel like they've accomplished something over the course of their time here at Clemson. And that's certainly a ideal that we all can understand. It's just not real business when you're trying to win football games at the same time.
There are big wins, and then there are big perception wins. And I think the biggest perception win this weekend was Sunday night by USC.
Huge win for Lincoln Riley, and maybe because of the way they won it. Miller Moss showing that he's capable in a late game drive to do what he did, and a defense that held up over the course of 60 minutes and tackled as if they'd practiced tackling. And to me, that was a huge step forward for the Trojans. And by the way, a huge step for the Big Ten as well.
But then I look at LSU with Brian Kelly. What is it about openers that certain coaches are great, certain coaches aren't? And he is a marquee coach who's now 0-5, his last 5 season openers.
Well, as you look at who they schedule in their season openers, it's a referendum on, and you look at across the board, everybody else doing it on openers. You're sitting there going, why do they keep doing this? Well, obviously they keep putting money in their pocket, but his comments after the game were more about an attitude like we've accomplished something while the game was still in hand, and that to me is something about a culture that he's got to get fixed.
Talking to Rick Neuheisel, CBS Sports college football analyst and, of course, a former college head coach. Notre Dame had one of those sneaky wins because they were underdogs at Texas A&M. And if you look at the schedule, I know they can only finish as high as 5 in the 12-team playoffs, but it's a manageable schedule for Notre Dame.
I will make a ridiculous referendum right here. Rick's ridiculous referendum here that they're in the playoffs. They're in. Okay. That game was so huge for them because they're going to be judged amongst a bunch of SEC teams at season's end. Had they lost on the road and finished 10-2, it would have been much harder. This victory allows 10-2 to get in. I think that as you look at the schedule, 10-2 is an easy number to get to, especially with the way that defense played. I think, and Marcus Freeman's becoming a rock star. That little focus on him at the end of the game, the handsome guy coming off, I told you so. That's going to carry some weight down the stretch. And I also believe the college football playoff committee will have them seated somewhere between 5 and 8, so the Irish get a home game.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Without question. That's made for television gold. Listen, it's happening. The Irish are in.
That'd be the Golden Dome, is what you're saying. It's gold.
That's what I meant to say.
I got it. Okay.
Leave it to DP.
Okay.
If I gave the eye for me.
If I gave you Georgia or the field.
Wow. Georgia's tough to beat. They're the other team that's already in the playoffs, and their schedule's still daunting. They go to Tuscaloosa. That one in Tuscaloosa, Kalen DeBoer. Everybody I know in Tuscaloosa says how good they look. Everybody, and we always assume Nick Saban was the GOAT and just it can't get any better. And yet this guy, if you look at his record, what is he, 100 and something and 12? I mean, he's a phenom, whether you count in South Dakota, Fresno, or Washington, 25 and 3. They blew out of the gates the other day. But Georgia's in the playoffs. But that Alabama Georgia game, I can't wait for.
But if I look at, Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas, I don't know if I take anything away from week one. I mean, they played weak opponents.
Texas looked darn good defensively without those two defensive tackles. They gave up less than 200 yards to a Colorado State offense where the quarterback and the wide receiver were both offered $600,000 to leave in the NIL market. That's saying something when you can just absolutely shut them down as you did without those two big hosses up front.
Well, we're going to get a better idea of Texas this weekend when they play Michigan. What do you? That's the marquee matchup. What do you expect out of that?
I think a close game for a while, and then Sark and company take it over. I think they're that put together. Davis Warren, 15 to 25 in his first game. Okay, and certainly got his feet wet. A home crowd will be helpful. I think they hang around, but I don't know that there's enough octane in their offense to hang with Texas.
I know that you were probably the first to say it, that you thought Jim Harbaugh was leaving Michigan. This is a long time ago when we talked about it. Now he's with the Chargers. Does anything happen to Michigan, you think, down the road with any of this with Connor Stallions?
I think it was interesting that they changed plans for having Jim Harbaugh come and be the honorary captain in week one. For him to say that he wanted to focus on the Chargers, I think he could have focused on the Chargers long ago. I think that was, let's not just poke these guys in the eye and make Sharon Moore take the hit here for what is obviously a little bit of a cover-up. Listen, when Connor Stallions goes on Netflix and says, "I do not recall," that's when we know we've got a little G. Gordon Liddy going on.
Great to talk to you as always. We'll catch up again. Thanks, bud.
Always a blast, DP. Enjoy the season.
Rick Neuheisel, our good buddy, contributed a few songs over the years, and always appreciate his insights in college football.